Welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, featuring the sharpest minds in marketing, inspirational case histories, and weekly insights you can apply to your business. Find out why top CMOs rank this podcast among their favorites. Now, here's your host, Chief Marketing Renegade, Drew Nizer.
Hey, it's Drew, and another in our series of Live from CES with Rob Chen, who is the CEO of Brightlink. And what I think is so cool about this series is that I've interviewed three founders, CEO type individuals, and getting their perspective on marketing in general. Now, it turns out that Rob is a former CMO himself. He was the CMO at CEB, and any of you who know, have been listening to the show for a while, know that we had Brett Adamson on the show a couple of times, and extensive conversations there, so I'm a big fan. So you bring, Rob, first welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Drew.
You bring a pretty important perspective to the CEO job, having been a CMO.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I would say, the marketing is one of the areas that I put a lot of personal emphasis on, and I care a great deal about. Sometimes to the chagrin of my marketing team, but it is something that I like to sort of continue to ensure that we're leveraging the best practices that are out there.
Well, and one of the interesting things is not a lot of CMOs become CEOs, and one of the things that the CEO needs to do is let go a little bit. So how do you bridge that, manage that? You know a lot about marketing, you may know more about marketing than your CMO. How do you make sure that you give them, he or she, the breathing room to do their job?
Yeah, well, look, the good news is there's a natural forcing function, right? I have a day job. I've got to run the company. So, I am a big believer that you hire good people, you get out of the way. I do have some ideas from time to time, but in all honestly, I don't really get engaged that much on a day-to-day basis. It's really sort of at the strategic level in making sure that we're doing the right things to surround our customer in all the ways that we want to reach them.
So we are at CES, and I just spent the morning, first at the Shelley Palmer breakfast, and then walking the floor in the central hall, which is where really what used to be the traditional hardcore consumer electronics are, the Samsungs, Panasonics, LG, and I did see a number of cool things. I'm curious what you saw or have seen so far at the show that was like, wow, either I want that personally or that's very cool.
Yeah, well, look, I like anybody else, I'm equally enamored with the flying cars and autonomous vehicles and all the developments in consumer electronics. But I think there's just as many cool things going on in some of the enterprise areas. The enablement of so much of the things that we'll need in the in this next gen world with 5G, right? And that's an area that sort of my company has some participation in. And so I think about some of what we heard today or yesterday actually in the Verizon keynote around 5G and what's coming. Some of that is very exciting for me.
Well, so that was an interesting point. I'm glad you brought that up. I walked by the Qualcomm booth and they said real 5G, and then Samsung also has said 5G is here. And then this morning, Shelley Palmer called BS on Verizon's announcement, saying it wasn't really 5G. What's your perspective on this? Where are we for real?
Yeah, I think true 5G deployment pervasively across all of North America really will take some time, right? I think we're making headways to it. There's lots of pilots going on. That's part of what Verizon shared when they gave the example in the keynote. T-Mobile also is doing some things here in Las Vegas. All of this is about getting to greater bandwidth, faster speeds, being able to get the throughput that we all need for all the devices and technology solutions. But because it's a complex industry, a lot of interconnectivity, lots of different moving pieces, it will take some time, right?
I mean,
it will come.
And what's so interesting about it is it really blows your mind the ripple effect of this technology in terms of the impact on smarter cities and transportation, impact on, because it's not about just downloading a movie in 5 seconds to your phone.
That's right.
There's a lot more to it from a B2B standpoint. Maybe you could let's spend a second on that and then we'll move on. So if we look at 5G, what's the most exciting exciting sort of business application that you see on the horizon?
Yeah, I think it's the fact that you can just really juice the multitasking and the multimedia aspects of all the interactions, right? And so having that richer communication experience with all the different modes of media that's available to us today is just really powerful, right? That's how people are interacting and are used to interacting.
Okay, so switching gears now closer in.
Sure.
Give me what's 6-7 words of what Brightlink is.
Sure. Well, Brightlink is a communications platform and technology company, and we sell voice, messaging, and cloud-based application solutions.
So it's funny. So we worked at one point with Vonage. We worked with a company called UReach.
Sure.
And some of these things have been around a long time.
Sure.
What's new in this world that would surprise people about voice and communication? Because we're talking about both.
Yeah, we are. I mean, at the core, communications is about connectivity, right? So we provide voice connectivity. We have a voice over IP network. We provide messaging connectivity, ability to send and receive messages. But one of the things that's unique about Brightlink is that we have a solution that goes across the entire communication technology stack. At the infrastructure level, we offer the core network services. We have a communication platform as a service level that offers an integration layer that democratizes access to those services. And then we have an application layer that has purpose-built applications that deliver value on top of those services. And so we do all of that. And today, we're not, we're certainly not Verizon, AT&T, but we're actually reasonably at scale. We deliver over 30 billion communication interactions a year.
Wow,
And
okay.
that we power that many. And we work with some of the leading companies that are out there, including the likes of Sprint, right? We actually do a lot of work in providing some of the connectivity and capabilities that they need in their networks.
So you mentioned anything as a service, and I was talking to somebody else yesterday about this, and it occurred to me that anybody that makes anything
Sure.
should be thinking about what it means to turn it into a service.
Yes.
Because it creates so many different opportunities, right?
Yeah,
it creates
absolutely.
sort of lower price of entry, easier customer adoption, some route to sort of scale. Talk about when in your world, because the CPA, as a service, what are we talking about specifically? What does that look like?
Yeah, a good example of that is the communication platform as a service is just really talking about having access to the underlying capabilities. One way we manifest that is through what we call cloud PBX or cloud phone system, right? So, and that would be for anybody who's used to the corporate phone system where you have the corporate IVR, the press 1 for marketing, press 2 for sales, the custom greeting, the hold music, the extensions, the ability to monitor your contact center. That's a holistic implementation that traditionally is really complicated, right?
And so here's the thing that's sort of where my mind is going is, first of all, that's something Renegade, as we're small market, what we call a strategic boutique. And what we have done when we moved recently is we just went completely cloud. We have one phone actually in the office. Everything else goes directly and is forwarded to people's cells.
Yep.
But when you call our 646-838-9000, you get a company message and a directory.
That's right.
But it's all cloud based.
That's right. Yeah.
And the notion of having hard phones is kind of almost ridiculous at this point. Why would you even need it?
That's right.
What's the innovation here now with this? I mean, where does that go? And I know what the point I wanted to make was before this is, here's the best part of this is, because you're not buying hardware and it's essentially software, the software keeps getting better.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? And so you don't have to invest in something that's going to go obsolete.
Absolutely.
That's the coolest thing to me about any of these as a service things is that because it's virtual, it's sort of like, it's like the difference between building a concrete wall,
Absolutely.
which is a moment in time or historically sort of, we all know irrelevant, and a virtual wall.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the utility model.
Right.
That hasn't changed since I was actually an early employee at Salesforce.com, right? And I was early on in a number of SaaS companies. And so that value proposition has not changed from the early days. It's about simple, easy, quick, and a better value proposition overall.
Okay, so let's pivot for a second.
Okay.
Talk about your marketing.
Sure.
And when in our pre-conversation, you started talking about how you were using your technology as a demonstration, sort of drinking your own champagne, if you will, using your product as a marketing vehicle. Talk about that.
Yeah. So look, I am a big believer in drinking our own champagne.
Much better than eating your own dog food, right?
That's absolutely better, much better analogy. And so aforementioned product, the Cloud PBX is a big product that we launched last year that we're actually getting a lot of market traction and momentum around. We have a different product that I actually use to market that particular offering. And it's also an offering that lots of marketers actually like to take advantage of. So this is on our messaging side of our business. We have the ability to actually text enable any number. Message enable any number.
That's really cool. What does that mean? So if someone calls my cell, which I've given on this show many times, if they call the show, call my number, they could actually, if they called my office number.
Your office number.
They could end up texting through that.
Sure. Think of all the small businesses out there, or any business, where oftentimes, particularly with the millennial generation, for whom the messaging, the SMS is just native to the way they interact.
Right.
They oftentimes will text back to a number and have that go into the ether. Right. Because you never really know what's text enabled and what's not.
Right.
And we have the ability to text enable any number, including landlines.
But they have to be on your system in order for that to happen.
No, we can do it. We have the ability to essentially do what's called an override and actually enable that number and make it possible for you to actually receive text messages on that. Now, you're going to have to access those messages via a mobile application that we can enable.
Oh, I see.
But you will see it on your phone no differently than you'll see it on your phone in a very similar way as you do with your text today. Right?
I see, but so it won't actually come as a text, it'll come into an app.
Into an app, right. But you can get the notification, it'll show up and say, hey, you have a text message.
I can't get that app, just forward it to my message, or is that next?
That may be next, but today you can't, because those are native functions.
Right, native functions. Yeah. But anyway, I just want listeners to pause and consider that for a moment. All of these messages that your businesses are getting to those lines could now be text messages. And what's interesting about that, one, it's easier to track. You don't have to have a call center. You can have then people respond via computer.
Sure. Yeah.
So that, from a customer service and support standpoint, sounds like a big breakthrough. But you use it as a sales tool.
I use it as a sales tool.
So talk about that.
So I'll give you an example. One of the things that I've struggled with as a CMO historically has been, we talk a lot about the omni-channel experience, right? That you want to meet people where they are, interact with them with a mode that they choose, and maybe start a conversation one way and end a different way. The reality that we all know as marketers is it actually doesn't truly happen most of the time. What I've done is I've taken the traditional email-driven campaign and I've actually created a vehicle, and we're doing this quarter for our Cloud PBX solution, where my sales team can go out there, they're listed on the emails, we personalize it to them, and we offer the customer the ability to respond back to us and engage us either by phone, by email, or by text, right? And the texting of that is to the numbers that we have text enabled for every one of the sales employees, and as well as our corporate number, which we can actually even test out here, and I can show you how it actually works. And when they do that, with just very simple keyword prompts, we can respond with multimedia type responses. If you want to know about the product, we can send you a piece of our collateral. If you want to know a little bit about how we compare versus other competitors, we can send some information around comparison charts relative to other types of offerings in the industry. If you want to know how easy to get started, we can send you our quick start guide, right? And this includes things like video and other things. It just, all of those are capabilities that are possible when your number is text enabled, right? And so previously that would have depended on people responding by email or calling, which a lot of millennials these days don't necessarily want to do.
Right. Okay. Love that. Have lots more questions for
Sure,
you.
yeah,
We're going to take
absolutely.
a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll zero in on some of those.
Great.
Did you know that Renegade Thinkers Unite was ranked number 2 of the top 10 podcasts for CMOs by Crackerjack Marketing? Wow, we're really honored. Now, we couldn't do that without amazing guests, and we've had some amazing CMOs on this show, and also terrific listeners like you all. If you like what we do here, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player. That way, you'll never miss an episode. Also, as a special thanks, I'd like to send you a free ebook on Renegade Thinkers. Now, for that, just email drew@renegade.com. Now let's get back to the show.
Okay, we're back, and my guest is Rob Chen, and we've been talking about some kind of very cool, what sounds like customer service technology, but you're using it for sales.
Sure.
And so I'm imagining this.
Yeah.
So an email goes out and it says, hey, if you want to learn more, you can text me or whatever, and you've enabled that. Now, first of all, that's weird behavior for someone to respond to. They don't know yet that exists.
Sure.
So that's one, they have to be trained. But the thing where my mind went was, you have an opportunity to learn. If they respond by text, chances are they're a younger person, and therefore their behavior is different and the kind of information that is going to be different.
Sure.
So in some ways, you could start to integrate AI and have really sort of next best response.
Sure,
Right?
absolutely.
You could have really smart computer learning going on as someone responds in a certain way and say, oh, well, they're a phone person. They're going to be hand-holding, or they're a hot lead.
Yes, that's absolutely right. And you're absolutely right, Drew, that, particularly AI has been a hot topic here at CES, right? We hear a lot of talk about it. And I would tell you that what we've implemented first with this solution is really a very rudimentary form of what is characterized generally as narrow AI, right? Very simple implementation. Effectively, the first way to do this, just because it's so unfamiliar for people, this is really, think of it as a text version of an IVR, right? And you have a tree with different decisions, and the way we bring people into that is through the email. You can articulate it in a certain way and say, look, if you have any particular questions around how easy it is to get started, just text us, start, and we will send you some information around that, right? And so you engage people in very simple ways. Now, down the road, we may want to be able to do free-form text responses and be able to use, sophisticated AI to get at different aspects of it. I just don't think we're quite there yet. There's still a lot to be worked out with the AI technology and algorithms. And from a practicality standpoint, much of what I want to be able to accomplish with the omni-channel experience, we can do with just a rudimentary sort of parameter-driven triggers.
Right, just sort of a dumb response.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so as I'm thinking about this, you're in an interesting position in that if you sent that kind of thing to a salesperson, they would go, oh my God, this is really cool, I want to use this.
Yes.
If you sent it to a telecom person or whoever is responsible for phone systems at the company, they may not get it because they're not going to see those marketing applications. So it seems like the people that might get excited about it might not be your buyers. How are you managing from a targeting standpoint your business?
Yeah. Look. I think that's a very valid question. That's no different for us than for anybody else. You mentioned a little bit about Brett Adamson and CEB. Look, having come from CEB, I ascribe to the whole challenger marketing model, where I think the current stat is somewhere in the range of about 7 people that you touch in a sales interaction. Right?
Yeah, he mentions 5.4 on the buying committee.
It moved up to 6.8 more recently.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm even rounding it up to 7.
All right.
So what we do is we absolutely focus on the business buyer, right? Because the value of what we're doing is, the business owner. If you're an SMB, if you're a large corporate entity, it's about the sales and marketing functions. But the technology functions are actually very important, and they need to know that this actually is enterprise grade. They need to know that this is a cloud-based solution that's built on robust infrastructure. Part of when I talked about the fact that our solution spans the entire stack, that's usually something that is very positive for the technology organization, knowing that there's effectively one throat to choke, right? We have the application layer, but we will also provide the underlying connectivity. So it's not parsed out, it's not piecemeal together, like in many cases where someone would have to go and buy those separately.
Okay, so you've got a bunch of targets, but there's one that you're sort of the business buyer.
Yes.
Now, the business buyer in small business is easy. It's the CEO and
the CEO, the owner.
Right.
Yeah.
And is that your primary target is small businesses?
We actually sell to both small businesses and enterprise. So small businesses, we generally leverage a channel model. We have a lot of what I characterize as sell through and sell with resellers who actually take our solution. It's powered by us, so it's co-branded. It's a powered by solution that they actually will sell to the SMBs that they serve, right? Because I think the use cases tend to get very specific. That restaurant that wants to manage reservations, wants to be able to take those text interactions and make sure nothing is missed. And the large enterprises, we tend to go direct. One of the largest law firms in the country is a customer of ours, and we actually deliver a whole suite of communication capabilities for that reason.
Okay, so that's interesting. So now, but it's very different in terms of what it takes to serve enterprise versus what it takes to serve.
Yes.
So you've essentially farmed out the sales of small businesses to partners, and that's efficient. You share some of the revenue. Maybe the margin's lower, but you get them and you grow it.
The economics actually are pretty good, and I think what we like about that more so than anything, it certainly is more efficient. But we like the fact that we are relying on people that truly know the needs of the small businesses, right? And in prior lives, I've run. I was a head of small business marketing at Visa, right? And we had tens of millions of customers. I understand that the small business market is highly fragmented, highly diverse, and it's a little trite to assume that any company, particularly sort of a smaller organization like us, a mid-sized company like us, it's really hard to really know how to serve all the different segments. Right. And so being in partnership with some of the value-added resellers and other sort of system integrator type companies, there's a lot of value in delivering a better outcome for the end customer.
So let's talk about is there any part of your marketing, other than the one that we've already talked about, where you go, man, we nailed it? Where it's just something that, so I've interviewed a number of CMOs who can point and say, 70% of marketing sales qualified leads were sourced through marketing, and then the ones that are very enterprise, it's like down to 20%.
Sure.
And I sort of, that's three different questions in one. So let's start with just, is there any sort of marketing that you've done this was amazing and it surprised you in terms of how successful it's been?
Yeah, I think that power by co-branding model, I think is one that I think was a right decision for us. I think the bias, especially someone like myself coming from a CMO background, is to wanting to go build your own brand. Right? And believe me, I care a lot about brand. I cut my teeth as a brand manager in CPG. I care about brand, right? Brand equity. That said, we actually get a lot more leverage on our brand by having a power by label and having it go through those channels of distribution where it's in its end delivery providing true value, right? And that gives me a very material lift. And so that's tremendous leverage, and it was one of the things that I think we're proud that we made that decision, and we feel good about it.
Is there some marketing that you've done that didn't work as well as you hoped?
I think one of the things that we're focusing a lot of emphasis on is getting better content to enable the social marketing piece, right? So sort of like SEO and SEM, which is very much predicated on having great content, I think it's even more so with social, and social needs to be constantly sort of that refreshing content, right? You need to have fresh stuff you need to put out there. So, our early social efforts wasn't as effective as I liked it to be. So we actually put it on hiatus for a little bit and fine-tune the underlying. We actually, frankly, get more lead gen out of still the search, the SEO and SEM pieces.
Right.
And in our model, as I described, we have sell to, sell through, and sell with.
Right.
And so I have a balance of lead gen from things that I do directly, things that I do source from sales and marketing directly, and also those that I get from partners. Right? So I can be a little bit choosy and not have to really go as big on social marketing right now when I don't yet have the content readiness for it. That's one of the things that I would call out as a marketer is like, I think everyone wants to do it, but you have to make sure you're ready for it.
Yeah, and I can tell you that having talked to lots of folks, most content programs aren't as effective as people would like.
That's right.
Most content is garbage.
Yeah.
And as a result, not only does it not achieve its basic goal of providing the information that a customer might be able to benefit from, it doesn't have, it has no SEO value because a lot of it is just recycled information that someone found on Google. And to actually put together an effective content program takes a tremendous amount of investment.
That's right. Yeah, it's harder to get true lead gen value. You might get some brand value lift, right? But as I've said to my marketing team, I care less about the likes. Likes are great, but that's not leads, right? And so we just need to categorize them appropriately. And so again, it's absolutely going to be a part of our mix. We do leverage, and certain channels are better than others, and so we use it in spots, and that's all part of the marketing mix.
So as a CEO, and we have lots of CMO and senior marketer, what are sort of 2 or 3 key lessons learned that you would share, because you've done both, and you've been what would you, especially as a CEO looking down, sort of, this is your opportunity to give some advice that some CMOs may benefit from. Give me top 3.
Yeah, well, look, I think one is, where CMOs, and I will put a pitch for my fellow brethren who are marketers, I think where we have a natural predisposition, particularly in today's world, is we're very externally focused, right? I believe, you need to come outside in, not inside out. And so marketers naturally have that outside in mentality. And so understanding that it starts with the customer, it starts with the use cases, it starts with kind of what are the need states and drivers for their success. That is a good way for us to think about, as for me as a CEO, how I would want to run the business. Right.
Okay. So we start with customers, extreme customer centricity on it. Well, that's one.
Yep.
What else?
Yeah. I think a second thing that I think is important to realize is, and this is generically across the board, is the value of culture, right? And I ascribe to Drucker's notion that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? And I think where culture comes into play and relates a little bit to the marketing branding mentality is, a culture is in many ways an extension of your brand. It's an internal extension, and also it's internal and it extends outward, right? So think about those elements of how we as marketers very thoughtfully construct our brand equity. That's the same mentality that it takes to actually think about culture.
And I totally agree. Have you done anything specifically to help sort of build that culture at Brightlink? Is there one sort of communications thing that you can point to that sort of brings it together?
Yeah, I think the best way is lead by example. I think, and look, I'm still early on. I joined Brightlink as CEO in September. I was on the board since May. So I'm in the early goings, and culture takes time, right? But I think constant repetition, leading by example. One thing I did is very specifically codified what the core values are. It's on our website. It's something that we talk about as a company, and that reinforcement is in some ways easier than reinforcing to your customer what the attributes of your brand are, right? Not everyone wants to always hear that. You have to actually demonstrate it.
So this is perfect place for me to wrap up and preach, and those of you who have listened to a lot of shows know these are the 3 things that are really strongly emphasized. One, one key, very focused story. Really get that story statement down, get it down to 6 words. 2, you have 3 target audiences: employees, customers, and prospects. 83% of dollars are for marketing are invested in acquisition. Why is the question I ask.
Yeah.
But if you get your employees on board, if they believe, they're advocates, they'll stay longer. In a competitive economy where a battle for employees can decide your success, thinking about employees first is really valuable. So this notion of culture that you described. When we finally get to customers, if you develop content for customers that they find valuable, then your prospects will too. That solves the problem.
Yeah.
And then lastly is trying to simplify your plan. It's really hard to do everything. What I loved about the things that you shared is your plan is integrated around the product that you've developed, so it's a demonstration and it's a use case at the same time.
Sure,
so it's very cool.
Absolutely.
So Rob, thank you so much for being on the show. It's really a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
And so to all of your my kind listeners who've waited, have stayed with us through this episode, thank you so much. Keep sharing the episode. Keep sending in your comments. I got a call the other day from actually picked up the phone and called me, which is really cool. I always encourage that. And maybe you'll be able to text me from my office number soon. So
we'll make that happen.
Yeah. So and until next week, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.
This has been Renegade Thinkers Unite, but it doesn't end there. Just go to renegadethinkersunite.com for more and subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. We'll talk with you next time on Renegade Thinkers Unite.